Hello everyone and welcome back to our second class session via Canvas. Thank you all again for being so accommodating given the situation. And next week we will be back to normal with our in-class sessions. So today we are talking about presentation aids, the visual aids that you will have to accompany your speeches. And keep in mind that the informative speech, our next speech, you will be required to have a visual aid. So, what kind of presentation aids should I use for my speech? Well, when addressing this question, you should consider one of the following. First, what kind of visual aid is going to enhance the quality and enhance the understanding of your speech the most? Meaning, is your visual aid going to pair well with the type of speech that you are giving? And next, you want to make sure that the visual aid is visible for all to see and engage with. Unless you're using audio, then it's available for everyone to be able to hear it. So most importantly, is it enhancing the quality of your speech and the understanding of your speech, and is it visible for everyone to engage with? Alright, so let's talk about the different types of visual aids. There's objects, which is just sort of like everyday items that you can bring in to enhance your speech, such as a piece of artwork, perhaps a uniform, a cultural artifact, such as the engagement that we had. All these just sort of typical items that you would bring in. The next is models, which is like a scaled up or scaled down version of something that you wouldn't be able to bring into class because we just can't see it. An example of this would be like a microscopic bacterial cell. That is something that, unless under a microscope, we just wouldn't be able to see. So you could then bring in a model of that, a replica of it, that's scaled up in size so that we would be able to see it. Or something that is, super large that you wouldn't be able to bring into class as well. A scaled down version of a scaled down model of it you could bring into class so that we would be able to see it. The next is text-based visuals. And this is a bit of a tricky one because I want you to tread lightly on it because I don't want you to take away from your speech by having your audience have to read something. That can be distracting for your audience, and it can also just take away from your speech. So when using text-based visuals such as a timeline of chronological events, things like that, make sure that it's not super text-heavy and that your audience doesn't have to spend too much time reading into it. And the last and most common physical visual aid is an image-based visuals, being charts, drawings, maps, photographs, graphs. The most common usually being like a photograph. And the most important thing to remember with this is that it needs to be visible to us to see. So a small little picture isn't going to cut it. But if you do have a picture that you think would be really great to include in your speech, consider projecting the picture up on the projector so that we'd all be able to see it. Another thing that could be done is passing the picture around the room. However, that doesn't give just as much justice to your speech as projecting it does, because when you project it, everyone's able to see this image as you are talking about it or as it relates to your speech. Whereas if you pass it around the room, some people are going to get it as you're talking about it, and some people are going to get it at the end of your speech where you're not really making reference to this anymore. The next is video and audio support. So YouTube videos, music clips, so on and so forth. And the thing that you want to remember about these is you want to keep them short. These should not overpower your speech, meaning that your speech should not be, half of your speech shouldn't be a video or audio clip because it kind of defeats the purpose of you actually giving that speech. So my rule of thumb is don't go over a minute. And if you have a video or audio clip that is over a minute long and you really feel like it would be a compelling piece to include every bit of it in your speech, then let's have a conversation about it and we can figure out ways to implement it into your speech while not taking away from you as a speaker. The next thing is you want to make sure that you prepare these technology clips that you're going to be using. So first you want to select the portion you want to use in advance. Rather than going up to the computer in the middle of your speech, skimming through the video, trying to find your place, hooking things up, it gets really distracting and it builds a wall with your audience where they no longer feel engaged. So you want to make sure you have the portion all set up so that all you have to do is click a button and you can play your clip. And this also sort of eliminates any unknowns that could come about when it comes to your video and audio clips. The next and most common type of visual aid would be a slideshow, such as PowerPoint, Google Slides, Prezi, etc. And there are some design principles that I really want you to consider. The first, keep it simple. You're giving a speech and you don't need to plaster all the information that you are giving up on this slide because it, again, defeats the purpose of your speech. You are presenting us with that information, so on your slide, keep it to only key words if you do feel the need to present certain information on a slide. Keywords, short, simple, no full sentences, and absolutely no paragraphs. Keep it to bullet points. We don't want the audience to have to read too much. The next is to build some repetition with your slides, meaning that if there is an important key concept or idea, you can sort of implement it throughout the slides. And I wouldn't say use the exact same words, but in different words, you can sort of implement these ideas the key idea that you want your audience to take away from this. And having those key ideas on your slides is going to make it more memorable for your audience. The next is contrast and spacing. Contrast meaning it adds a lot more to the readability of these slides. So contrast such as on my slide, for example, I have a white background with nearly black font that says slideshows, PowerPoint, Google Slides, etc. It makes it a lot more readable when I have a light background with very dark font. And the opposite goes if you want to have a dark background, then you would want to have a very light font, just so that it creates the contrast and makes it readable. And the last being spacing. Again, we don't want to plaster all of this stuff onto a slide. So it's really important that you keep things spaced out so that it doesn't distract your audience, it doesn't confuse them, and it doesn't take away from your speech. So looking back at one of the activities that we did in class for organizing our main points and creating patterns, we had an activity where half of the class had to memorize the 16 items that were on a slide, and the other half had to remember the 4 items that were on 4 slides. The half of the class that only had to remember the 4 items on each 4 of the slides remembered things a lot better because things were not plastered on. There wasn't this chaos on all these slides. Things were nicely spaced out and there wasn't too much for them to have to look at or remember. So spacing is key when it comes to readability and whether your audience can really digest the information that's on the slide. And when it comes to the fonts, we want to just keep it simple again, just like the design. We want to make it readable, and that is the overall objective with our slides, is to make it readable and understandable. So consider fonts such as Arial, Cambria, Times New Roman, and Georgia, because these are typical fonts that are used very often and are very much readable. And you also want to make sure that this font is large enough to see. There's no point in putting it on a slide if people can't see it. Adding color for emphasis, and this can sort of, again, create the contrast, such as the green and the yellowish orange that I have on my slides. It creates a contrast with the font, but it also brings a little bit of a level of excitement rather than just a white slide with black text on it. It can help get the audience a little bit more engaged without totally distracting them with all these crazy colors plastered all over the slide. And the last thing is to consider using mostly pictures instead of words. You are presenting this information. We don't need to read all this information off of a slide. It takes away from you as a speaker. However, if you were to post some pictures on the slide that really embody the ideas and the concepts that you are discussing, this really helps us to see what it is that you are talking about. So consider, if you are going to have a PowerPoint or a slideshow, think about putting pictures on your slides rather than a bunch of words. So some general guidelines for presentation aids. The first, make sure it's visible, make sure it's loud enough for all. You need to have this be something that your audience can see and hear, otherwise there's no real point to having it at all. The other thing is you want to display it or have your audience hear it only when you're discussing that visual or audio that you have. So you can consider covering certain things up, putting them on pause, or putting a blank slide in between slides so that your audience isn't focused on something that you're not actually referring to in your speech. So take away that distraction that your audience may get if they are looking at a slide or watching something that doesn't have anything to do with what it is that you're speaking about at the moment. The next is face your audience, not the visual. This comes into play so often with PowerPoints. It is so tempting to turn around and just read off the slide, but it creates this barrier of engagement with your audience, and it brings down your credibility to some level. Make sure you're facing your audience and keeping engaged with them. Your visual is there to provide that visual for your audience. That's just what it is. It's not for you to read off of. The next two is to keep in mind the sort of things that can come about when using visual aids, such as obstacles that you may need to overcome. So please rehearse with your visual aids so that you can anticipate some of the obstacles that may come up, and have a plan B if something fails, meaning technology usually. If for some reason the technology in the room isn't working, you have a backup plan. And one of the things that I think works pretty well is if you are considering having a slideshow, and for some reason your slideshow doesn't work, having a handout with the slides on this handout that you can pass out to everyone in the class still allows them to see that visual aid, what it was that you were going to refer to, and you can still make reference to these slides throughout your speech without having to project them. And most importantly, make sure your visual aid is enhancing the quality of your speech. Ask yourself, would my speech be any better or any worse if I did not have this visual aid? It's not just there because you're meeting a requirement. Make sure it's there to serve an actual purpose and enhance the quality and understanding of your speech. So some examples of good and bad ways that we can approach a visual aid. Say you're giving a speech about nutrition. A bad visual aid would be to bring in an apple. We all know what an apple looks like. Most of us know what it tastes like. We know it's one of the nutritious snacks that we can have. So it doesn't really do much for your speech. What would do a lot for your speech is consider bringing a sample meal prep menu in for your audience to refer to. This would really help enhance the understanding of what nutrition is and some examples of nutritious meals that would enhance the quality and understanding of this topic of nutrition. The next example is a presidential candidate. Say you want to talk about someone that's running for president. A picture of them is something that would just be not a great visual aid because you need to add more than that. Having a picture of them is quite necessary. We do want to put a face to this person that you're talking about. So do have a picture, but pair it with something else because a picture of them isn't enough. So consider maybe bringing in a chronological timeline of their achievements to show us what they've done and where they stand on certain issues. The next is if your speech is about homelessness, don't just bring in a poster that says homelessness is a problem. We all are going to school in San Jose. We know it's a problem. We see it around campus. We know that homelessness is an issue here. So we don't need a poster to tell us that. Do, however, consider bringing in a video clip that shows the extent of the problem. We know there's a problem here, but we maybe don't know the factors contributing to it or the extent of the problem, and a video can really help us to see what it is that's really causing this issue. Alright, so that is all I have for you today on visual aids. Make sure you check in with the discussion board for the activity portion of this class so that you can earn participation points for that. And don't forget that your topic submission is due on Tuesday via Canvas. This is your topic for the informative speech, so please do submit that to Canvas so I can give you feedback on your topic. Make sure you read Chapter 14 and be ready to sign up for a speech day. All right, thanks so much, everyone, and I will see you all back in class next week. All right, have a great weekend. Bye.